Hello, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to this special Memorial Day episode of the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We are at the tail end of May 2024, if you're listening live, end of the wonderful graduation, May-December, whole time of crazy, and hopefully you made it through fairly unscathed. Either way, take a deep breath. Today, we are enjoying a beautiful interview with Melissa Kircher, Enneagram 5. She's part of that 5-3 Marriage Glow Up. And she is not holding anything back in terms of helping us to see how she has gotten to a state of health using healthy therapeutic tools and Enneagram, but also just being honest about how life is still real and they still have hard moments. So I'm really excited that we can always keep that in mind as we do our journey together, that we're still learning and growing no matter what's going on with us. And I am right there in the thick of it all with you too. Just before we bring Melissa on, I will just announce, if you saw my IG this weekend, you already know it. Three of our favorite people graduated this year. My girls are right now at a homeschool prom at Gaylord Palms, Orlando. For those of you who have traveled to Florida and know this big hotel, I know I told my sister and she's like, oh yeah, that's where my last conference was. So I know it's a huge, beautiful place because the girls are like, ooh, we have to go here, mom. But deeper dive is that a lot of us are having to face these endings. And I know you still have to do life in between it all. I've had to really sit there with tears and say, oh my gosh, like three of my daughter's dearest friends are not only graduating, but all moving to different states. The two other girls besides them that did the Rewired podcast. And that season's over. And they're probably gonna have a Yaya sisterhood sort of summer fling, but it's this is it. And I think a lot of you are there with things you're walking through or changing or seeing your kids walk through that. And how do we maintain our mental health in these moments? How do we allow ourselves even to fall into like, okay, I'm in a maybe not an exciting season and the doldrums are setting in and I feel the mental health come up for those times. So I know I can have a little of both where I'm like in the thick of it with kids and also these moments of, oh my gosh, if I don't make goals for myself, then I will also have nothing going on. So there's these moments and juxtapositions in our lives, right? That we have to decide, how am I going to take care of me through the hard decisions, through the changes? So Melissa's episode is here to help you find regulation through somatics, through internal family systems, through Enneagram. And of course, this is not your therapy session. If you need that, make sure to get your therapeutic and spiritual care, your self-care, keep those date nights going. These are regulatory ways for you every day, your walk and talks. The actual research says keep doing these things through it all and you'll be okay. But Melissa's here to give you a bit of a deeper dive. If you're stuck and you're doing all these other things and you're like, but I still have more to process. That's exactly why we're having this convo for you and with you. Melissa hails from the Scottsdale, Phoenix area. She is in her child era, also long married era like me, and she is an Enneagram influencer on Instagram, and she has a huge account with such a depth. So I hope you'll enjoy her as an author, as an artist, as a person who inspires, as a coach. I heard also through a person who had seen her as their coach saying what a life-changing coach she was. So I'm just so happy we get to share her with you today and her wisdom. Let's talk to Melissa. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us for the Enneagram and Marriage podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, well, your work as an artist, as a writer, and as an Instagram influencer are so impressive, so beautiful, and we're so thankful we get to talk to you today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your 3-5 pairing, a little bit about maybe how you met your hubby, or just some of the fun facts about you guys?
Sure. Do you want me to start with me or us together?
I would love you first.
Okay, so I'm Melissa, obviously.
Yeah.
I'm an Enneagram 5,
Mm.
wing 4, but I also have a 6 wing, so I have a little bit of heart and a little bit extra head.
Awesome.
Um, I have 2 kids and I'm married. I've been together with my husband for 23 years together, married 19 years.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's been a
Um,
long time.
yeah, wonderful.
My son is adopted through the foster care system, and then my daughter was a surprise after a lot of battles with infertility. So have been through that as a family. Building a family was really difficult and hard. So,
Yeah.
and now they're in preteen years.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I'm a writer, artist, coach, Enneagram coach, and yeah. Anything else?
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. And all the layers I think we're all hearing when somebody says adoptive foster care, we know this is a huge layer. And then you're saying infertility, a huge layer, and just
100.
still being married with those things. Just huge
Mhm.
kudos to you guys. We're gonna dig into some of your best tips today because
Sure.
we know that's and preteen. So you're like, I'm in it with you all, right? Because many of our listeners are in the hard throes of it too, and the beautiful.
It is a weird stage. It's just weird. It's just weird. I don't know how else to say it. They're like toddler brains in big people bodies, and
It's a good way to say it.
oh yeah, it's just a whole thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of tears, a lot of wild emotions, up and downs, hormones hitting unexpectedly. I still have my youngest in that, and it's I just finished with the whole weekend of people in that range, and I was like, "Wow, they're all over," right?
Yes, that is a great way to say it too. They are all over. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, tell us a little bit about hubby, just in terms of your guys' love story or some of your strengths, weaknesses, or even a bit about how you met.
Sure. Well, we were college sweethearts.
Oh.
And yeah, so we met in school and then we got married once we graduated.
Mhm.
And then we wanted a couple, since we got married young, we wanted to have like some young years together to just chill and be.
Yes.
And so that was nice. And that was fun. I'm glad we did that. And then it ended up being more extended because
Yeah.
when we decided, because we thought we had control, you know, that
Yeah.
we were ready to like have kids and start a family, it became apparent that that was going to be a challenge. So I think, I mean, I say 4 years, he says three. I think it might be five, but who knows? We went through many years of infertility, so miscarriages, and we did all the things. I went through three rounds of IVF,
Mm.
um, and then was kind of told it was kind of a mixture of both of us,
Yeah.
and that was interesting to see. We did not know the Enneagram back
Mm.
then.
Yeah.
Discovered it right after having kids, actually. So back then, there were a lot of misunderstandings. We were
Mm.
coping completely different. I mean, he's a three,
Yeah.
so he shut down emotionally in every way possible.
Mhm.
And while I'm a five, I was way more emotional than he was because he shut it all down. And I was being worst case scenarioing because I had a six wing kind of come up and just thinking everything through and doing all of, I had to do a lot of it. And so we learned a lot about how we dealt with it. I mean, once we went through that, and then once we went through foster care, which is a whole nother thing. I remember he did, the same thing. I was processing my feelings more in real time, and he was holding them in. And then once we adopted our son, we got out into the car in the courthouse and he just sobbed. It was like 2 years of worth of sobbing because it takes a long
Mm.
time to adopt. And yeah, so we work really well together as a three and a five,
Awesome.
um, until conflict happens. I mean, I'm sure with
Yeah.
everybody, until conflict happens or until we need to deal with something more hairy. And then we're very different in how we deal with it. But the Enneagram has given us a lot of really great language to be able to depersonalize it and to be able
Yes.
to understand here's what's going on with you, here's what's going on with you, and to not only understand, but to then help each other
Mm.
out of those things. So
Mm.
as a three, I help him into his feelings and he helps me limit my thoughts. He'll, constantly like, when will the thinking be enough? At
Mhm.
what point will this stop now?
Mhm.
And I'm like, good question. So
Yeah.
yeah, he's
Mhm.
he's great. We we have been married for a long time, so we have experienced so many different things, and I would say the hard way. We learn the hard way. We do not sail through it. It is we fail and fail and then learn our lesson and then fail some more. So I
Yeah.
mean, we've had tons of ups and downs, and I think we make a great pairing. And then I also think there are always room to
Mm.
grow and improve.
Yeah, yeah, that
But yeah,
makes so much sense with every
yeah.
pairing, as you said so well, and also in your particular ways that you know what you do. You're like, I invite him into his heart space. And you have the female overlay too, having been probably given a bit more chances to exude this in perhaps more estrogen. And so there are pieces that maybe you have lent him, even though you're not the heart type, but he's the heart type, but because he's in the center and he gets numb as a male and as a three, that you've been able to share, which I think is so helpful and not limiting you as a five who could never have an emotion.
Oh yeah. I think we're really, I mean, I don't know what you find in your practice, but I find that fives are extremely emotional and sensitive.
Mhm.
We just don't show it to you right as we feel it. We save it for later when we're alone and then have our very, very big, profound feelings. But you
Mhm.
wouldn't necessarily know it in the moment because we know how to unconsciously shut it off. But I'm way more emotional
Yeah.
than my husband. But actually, then when he lets his emotions out, then I have to work really hard
Yeah.
because then he actually is in the heart triad. So he can come up with them more. So then I'm like, oh no. And then I have to work hard to not get overwhelmed, even though I invite him into it. So it is this
Yes.
constant, I'm like, okay, now sit on your hands because now he's having his feelings and emotions. Don't speak, don't enter. It's very hard for me not to
Mhm.
interrupt him and be very
Mhm.
logical about things when he's actually emotional. So we're still learning about how to communicate effectively about feelings as a three and a five.
Oh my gosh, and you just I mean, I really have actually studied so many couples across 20 years that I think that every type, even 2s, would feel that sense with us, that they are good at looking at other people's feelings, but their own are harder to find. But I love how you said 5s have these big, huge emotions that they deal with on their own. And I would add to that too, that many times when they're healthier, they do that. Now, are any of us perfectly healthy? No, but I think some of the 5s that don't in my practice do that are the ones who are still very, very lost in the thoughts and the negative chaining, who can't come out of that to get themselves to the feelings. And so they're flying off into the deeper unhealth places of a 5. So I actually love hearing that you're like, I know what I need to do, and at least I'll do it, but alone sometimes, right? Or in a safe moment with him.
I mean, yes, I do catch myself in the thought chaining of negativity
Oh,
that goes
gotcha.
on and on and on and on.
Yes,
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that. Leslie Hershberger once said, "Scratch a 5, you get a 6. Scratch a 7, get a 6." And I asked her recently, "Is this true of the other triads too?" And she's like, "Let me think about that." But it is
Mm,
true for our triad, at least. I really loved that touch point,
mhm,
because we
mhm.
all get that. Any of you thinkers out there listening or watching, yes, we get you. We still do it. And the late Dr. Sue Johnson of Emotionally Focused Therapy also, I noticed recently, had shared she still gets into the whole tizzy, at that moment in her
Uh-huh,
life. So it's so
mhm.
comforting to hear, like, yes, even helpers like yourself and coaches, we still have our battles. But you do
100%.
know how to walk through it to get to the other side, even if it's later, like Sue Johnson said. So help us to understand that perhaps a little bit today when our listeners are feeling like they're in a really deep, dark space. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about trauma and what that looks like for people, because just some of our listeners are like, even to the basic level of what would you say conversationally trauma really is in life or in marriage?
Mm. I think that's a really complex, good question with a lot of nuance to
Yeah.
answer,
Yeah.
which I'll come at it from a coaching perspective versus therapy.
Yeah.
Because I am a coach and not a
Yeah.
therapist,
Yes.
I'm really careful to speak on where I stay in my lane, if that makes any sense.
Yes,
Like,
I
I
do.
know where, the boundaries are. So the kind of trauma, so I'm trauma informed,
Mm,
and therapists, do much more extensive, I mean, I do a lot of certifications in trauma, but there's different levels for coaches versus therapists. But,
yeah.
at a basic level for both,
Mhm.
trauma is something that negatively impacts us and has lasting, um, ramifications on our head, heart, and
Mm,
body, right? Like it
yes.
causes things to be held sometimes within the body if we don't process it. If we do process it, we can process it and let it go if we know that something is traumatic.
Mm,
Sometimes our bodies just hold on to it. Besser Randall
mm,
Polk, the body keeps
mhm,
the score.
mhm,
Um, I think sometimes people talk about, big T trauma or little T trauma. And
mhm,
really, there's I don't think there's any such thing. You can have something that might seem little t trauma but have really huge long lasting impacts, and something really horrific that happened, like a car accident and somebody dying,
mm,
that would seem to be huge trauma that
mhm,
somebody else who has the skills, has the support, knows
mm,
what to do,
yeah.
can work through that. And while it is still wildly traumatic, won't have incredible lasting negative impacts because they know how to kind of
Mm,
work through it. So I
yeah.
think it's a lot about having knowledge and awareness, toolkits, learning, support to be able to connect with oneself
Mhm.
And it also depends on what age you are.
Yeah.
Little ones don't know what trauma is. They don't know how to handle it. And if it's
Yeah.
caregivers that are the cause of that
Mm.
trauma,
Yeah.
they can't work on healing that until it's validated at some point later on in life. And then they, go in and research it and find support and healing modalities. So um, I think I'm really encouraged that people are more aware of trauma now and know the verbiage, know the different modalities, know who to seek out that's appropriate for them. I love how it's opening up these days. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
Okay.
I was careful to say conversationally because I think our listeners, it's just like we all can get very lost in the word without even describing it sometimes. And so it's just
Sure.
helpful. You did a beautiful job of just reminding us in general what it is. And also, you really beautifully fed into my next question, which was going to be how can people begin the work to heal? And you gave us this reminder that there are seasons where it's near impossible. And you've already explained foster care, adoptive children often
Hmm.
are starting out with their OT and not even being able to swallow and already having in utero trauma. And so just being able to say when they're older and if they get the support they need, that's when they can start working on it. And there will be nuance. But I guess to our end of the question, do you feel that there are certain ways when you hear of a client who needs coaching trauma care where it's in your lane? Um,
Hmm.
where do you usually like to start? Do you start with somatics, internal family systems, anywhere else that you feel like, oh, this is my favorite place to begin the work?
I don't actually have a favorite place or a kind of formula for it. I'm really intuitive,
Mm,
kind of gut based, really paying attention to each person, getting
mm,
to know each client and how we interact and what the energy is.
mm, mm,
And I really pay attention to body language. I pay attention to tonal voice inflection. Um, and I'm very careful to respect as I'm asking questions, am I going too deep? What was your reaction to this? Do I have consent to go here?
mm,
And then once we start getting into places, I'm sort of intuitively feeling out which modality might work best, whether it's starting with somatics or even Enneagram work is great for trauma. Sometimes with certain people, sometimes IFS is a good place to start, sometimes breath work, sometimes, body scanning or more meditation kind of things. It
mm,
really depends on the person, and
mhm,
it's really a unique experience for
mm,
each individual. And sometimes we even start on one and then shift
mm.
to something different. We don't always stick with one
Yeah.
thing the whole time. If I'm working with doing parts work with internal family systems, it doesn't mean that every session is parts work. It might be parts work one time, and then another time I might be like, oh, I'm noticing something going on in your shoulders. Like, can you tell me, is there
Mm,
tension there? Am I noticing that correctly? And they're like, oh, I didn't realize. Like, and then, okay, well, what could that be?
mm.
So we move around a lot based on what's going on in each hour, really.
Wow, I love that micro analysis, which I think is a gift of the five, that you are very detailed and observant. And so people can really know that. And I think already probably some of our listeners are like, I'm going to get her coaching info out of the notes for that reason, because that's really, I think, newer that everybody's starting to do some bottom up somatic work, but that you're even reminding everybody that that's not the case for everybody, that sometimes it's going to be that certain people prefer different styles or work better with different questions. And so you're nuancing and you're working through a system that you've developed, which is intuitively based. And I love that you have that capacity so that you
Mhm.
can get where you need to get together and find out what tools work the best. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, somebody might be coming in with a physical issue that's, something that they're going through medically. And so
Mhm.
somatic work is not a safe place to start. I can't, that wouldn't be good to force that, where reparenting might be a great place for them. Or, you
Mm,
know, so I really try to pay attention to and creating safety first. So a feeling of
mm,
safety, a felt sense of connection,
mm.
helping clients define what is safe and unsafe, having consent, all of that.
Oh my gosh, it feels so safe for me to hear you say that because I was dealing with physical pain this weekend and it just makes me feel like that makes so much sense. And I've never thought about that with coaching or counseling, and having been in both worlds for this long, I'm realizing that I don't think I've ever received that kind of care, and how
Mm.
beautiful that is, that you would say, on a day like that, how can you be gracious to yourself? How can you parent? And I think that's, of course, part of the whole, like, the treatment plan or philosophy that many of us went to coaching because we were like, oh my gosh, this person's more than a diagnosis, or 8 to 10 sessions isn't going to do it. And so I love that you're like thinking out of the box there. That's so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm a 5. I don't like rules.
This is true. Fives have two parts. Like, we think about it sometimes in our Freudian language when I'm coaching, but like the two adults part of them, and then the id fun. And so you're like, the parent part is like, we don't need any more of that. There's enough of that, huh?
100% what you just said. Yes, I'm so responsible, also so fun, very rebellious, but also very rule following when it serves like self-preservation type instincts. I think it's more if rules don't make sense, then
Yeah.
why? I think most fives are like that. If they
Yeah.
make sense and they'll keep me safe, great. If they
Mm.
don't make sense, I will probably push against them and break them.
Yes, but that's so good that you're like, I will think for myself. It's one of my core values to have that freedom to think for oneself, like Victor for his.
100%.
I'm
As
right
I
there with
think,
you, girl.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I bet as a seven, yeah, the sevens
yeah.
are like, no, you don't get to tell me what to do.
Yeah, yeah. Wes and I
Yeah.
had to figure out what each of our core values were, and that was one of mine that we discovered inside and outside of the
Mhm.
Enneagram. And it helps in a relationship when you know what those are. And I love how
Mhm.
you bring that to your people, like I said, so uniquely, so beautifully. Perhaps our listeners here who may not understand a little much at all, perhaps about somatics, could hear a little bit more about that. And I even thought we might be able to just talk that out type by type, since that is newer. People aren't doing it as much. Would that be okay with you if we could just talk type by
Sure.
type about how people might even just begin a bit of somatic work for their personality type?
Sure. I
Perfect.
mean, for me, the general definition of somatic is just body work, the same way you'd say like, oh, breath work, but that, kind of ties into it's
Yes.
paying attention to and noticing what's going on with
Mm,
your body,
mhm,
sensations. Certain people connect that to feelings or colors or
mm,
movement. There's all different kinds of things that you can do. I think the Enneagram is a great inroad. It's
mm,
almost like a shortcut, kind of. The
mm,
same way, like in internal family systems, I think Enneagram is great because Enneagram shows your patterns, and patterns lead to parts.
mm,
Patterns lead to how you might move in the world, and how you move in the world is your energy, and your energy gets back into your body.
mhm,
So, when we talk about head types,
mhm,
the 5, 6, 7s of the Enneagram,
mhm,
somatic work could be moving them out of their heads, where
mhm,
we tend to think and think and think and think, where they have a lot of energy, into heart and body. So, movement practices that reconnect with the
mhm,
body, like yoga, is really good because
mhm,
it's slow. You have to focus on the movement. You don't have a lot of, you're thinking, but you're trying to think about what you're doing with your body, right? Um,
mhm,
or even running for head types is, I find, really good because there's the hard poundings. They're feeling the feet. It's kind of a way of grounding. Um, and then from that connection with the body, then I feel like a lot of emotions tend to come out. So then it's a lot of, touching the heart space, feeling that heartbeat, breathing and noticing those emotions. What do you do physically with those emotions? Once, you get from the head to the body, then the heart. Sometimes we need to do things with our emotions to move the energy through.
mhm,
So, and then, with body types, they're going to start with somatic almost sensation. They're not going to want to say, this is how I feel, or this is what I think as much. They're going to have a general sense of movement and beingness. And so somatic work is often working with that,
mhm,
right? Like I often, with like eights, they're like, well, how do I grieve? Or how do I, do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, what do you do now? And how can we incorporate what you do now? And can you then add feeling into that somehow? And they usually have unique ideas for, well, I do, this, and then I could
mhm,
add this emotion into this
mhm.
exercise program that I already have. Or there's a lot of body energy. For nines, it's different because they're a little bit repressed, but they,
Yeah.
once you get and say, oh, well, how do you gut intuit things? They go, oh, yeah. So then somatic work a lot is breathing. Breathing releases a lot of emotions that are pent up for nines.
Mm.
Um, ones also like they like somatic work to be productive.
Yeah.
Um, so like, in session, not very much, but I will suggest things to do outside of session in which
Mm.
they could be doing two things at the same time.
Yes,
Like,
I love that.
right? So, like,
Mhm.
do you have a work break in which you could take a walk?
Yes.
Great. During that walk, could you notice feelings of sadness and joy? Like,
Mm.
and that way you're getting something done. It's
Mhm.
productive and there's a start and end time and it's boundaried, that kind of thing.
Oh my
And then
gosh,
the
naming. Yeah, just everything
naming.
we know about both of these triads. It's so helpful. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And then the heart triad, a lot of emotion based things first. So emotional release somatics, throwing rocks in a pond, pushing against a doorway,
Mm.
um, things that allow emotions to move, breaking things in a safe way, like a rage room or twisting a towel where you can't hurt yourself, or a towel,
Yeah.
things that express emotionality because there's a lot of emotion that has to
Mhm.
come through. And then things that then calm the nervous system, right? So something like box breathing would really help calm, and then grounding is really helpful in the heart types where sense your space in the room, or you're feeling your bare feet on the floor.
Mhm.
That gives that connection, full body connection. So it's not just the heart; it's the full, and then the head tends to come, and clarity kind of comes after the heart hits the body, and then head. So those are
Yeah.
just some of the ways. There are
Mhm.
many more, but
Yeah, but that's a really great start because obviously you can't give them all today. But I think that when we're kind of stuck only in our type, we forget that we share a lot in common with two other types in our processing center for intelligence. And so you're just reminding us all that even if you're, like you said, a nine in the body triad, like we still can, if we go through your body, we can then get to those feelings. And I think that's what you keep
mm,
centralizing back on is people have to do their feelings work. But to do that feelings work first, the body is very real. We have to attend to it, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that was something as a 5 I learned through many
Mm,
years of therapy
mm,
and doing my own work
mm,
and discovering that connection. I think I hated my body for a long time,
mm,
especially, going through infertility, and there's a lot of detachment. I went through a lot of trauma as a kid, and so had a lot of
mm,
diagnoses happen in my younger years, teenage years, young 20s years, was
mm,
constantly sick
mm,
and really had a messed up relationship with my body. Really didn't
mm.
like, going to the doctor is still kind of traumatic for me because I'm like,
Yeah.
what are they going to say now?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I understand that very much. And I'm married to a medical provider. So I
Are you? Oh,
but I
I'm sure
usually
he's
use
wonderful.
yeah, but I use him as my buffer. I'm like, "You're good. We don't need to keep
Mm,
going to anyone else," because I feel that and I've been traumatized by medical providers too. So, I think many of our listeners have, and it's so sad. But there's just so many that even when they don't mean to, like you said, this is
yeah.
part of your upbringing, your own trauma, and there's that angle too where a lot of them are looking out for money. And I know because we're in the field and we deal with it every day. So, it's
Mhm.
so helpful for you to just say, this has been part of your work is to really process what do I love about my body? Like how does my body care for me? How can I care for my body? Like that is part of it all, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think through a lot of therapy, a lot of those diagnoses started to go away. And then through doing trauma schooling and learning all about that, because I'm a 5. So if I do something, of course, I like then have to learn all about it.
Yes.
It was wildly interesting to see. And I'm not suggesting that if you go to therapy, all of your diagnoses will be healed. That's
Right.
absolutely not true.
Right. Right.
However, in my case, a good number of them
Mm,
were because of the release of trauma, the working through it,
mm,
my body was able to heal. And then it
mm,
was really profound to see, wow, I say to it often, you are so strong. Thank you. Like, thank you
mm,
for being strong. Thank you for helping. And if I catch myself being negative about it, I go, oh, and I
mm,
have to out loud say, I'm so sorry.
mm,
You've been there for me. You've gotten me through so
mm,
much. Like, thank you so much. And I'm gonna trust you. It's really been
Yeah.
my own work to trust my body, my own work to love her, and to see her as a living entity that is such a huge part of me. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's a huge part of who I am. And
Mm.
advocating for myself now when I do go,
Mhm.
I have to prepare before going to a doctor, to a specialist. I just had
Mhm.
to go to a knee specialist, and
Yeah.
I wrote down all of my things,
Yeah.
did my breathing before, so I
Yeah.
calm myself down, and so that I know
Mm.
and I feel grounded, so that when I'm, my body, of course, amps up when I go
Yeah.
into the office.
Yeah.
But then, it was a wonderful experience that I just had with
Mm.
a
Oh,
medical professional. So,
yes, there are so many good ones that we get to have too.
so many good ones. Yes. Yes.
Especially as we have found our own voices as adults, I think sometimes when you've done some of your therapy and your work, you're just telling everybody it accentuates all of your life when you do your own work, when you get in touch with your body and your mind and your heart.
Hmm.
That's really neat to hear that you did that so that when your body needs it, you can safely go get the help you need. Oh, I love that you personally have benefited from this somatic work.
Hmm. I will be honest, I still drag my feet a
Yes.
lot. And
Right.
I'm also over 40, so I
Mhm.
have way more specialists now than I did in my younger years. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a thing that I'm still working on doing, making sure I go to all my appointments and things like that. But yes, I have greatly
Mhm.
benefited from
Yes.
it myself.
Yes, but you're also telling us, yeah, you're going to have to bear that reality of like, if you don't like it, don't expect doing your work will make it like, I love this, maybe that unhealthy seven space that we would all want to avoid. But
Hmm.
just, hey, I can be stoic, I can be strong, and I can be gracious. It's that both and feature. Um,
Both and.
oh, so good. So I loved how you said that the body types need to first get that energy out generally because I've been with my sister who's a type 1 this weekend, and that's, I think, why some of
Hmm.
my body was triggered because she was like, "We're going out to dinner, but instead of going out to dinner, do you wanna go walking?" And she's one of my podcast listeners, so if she's listening, yay, I love you, I love that. We
Hmm.
talk about this all the time, but it's just so funny how we're all different, and my husband's a 1 also, so he was like, "Yeah, I'm good, I don't need to eat." And then some of us were just like, "We need to eat," My 9 was growling at that point.
Oh my goodness.
And so it's like learning like what is each of our bodies really needing, but also what my extended family, because my siblings and I do our work quite a lot and talk about everything. It's like we get to say, I still love you. And I hope that our listeners can start doing that with their families too. Like, this is what my body needs. It needs a rest right now. It needs food. It needs movement. And so I think
Hmm.
that's neat that you're inviting people to do that themselves. As we branch out, do you feel like that's been helpful to those who are married, those with families? Like I'm sort of kind of just noticing with you.
100%. I think
Mm.
my family.
Yes.
So I was uniquely gifted with what we think are two assertive children. I would, in this, you don't type your children, but you can, as a parent,
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
at this moment in time, and in all the moments before, and it could change because they're still developing, and and we don't use the Enneagram language with them,
Yeah.
but they seem to be very assertive, very
Mm.
in the future,
Mm.
very much reality needs to bend to them.
Mm. Good.
I would guess probably an 8 and a 7.
Mm.
And my husband is 3 and I'm a 5.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about how that energetically shows up in our life, they are fast moving,
Yes.
doing people, and their bodies need that. That's how they're
Yeah.
wired to
Mhm.
go and be and do.
Yep.
Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
being meaning like what's happening now? What's happening 10 minutes from now? What's the plan for
Yeah.
tomorrow and next week? Like,
Yeah.
whereas little me is stuck in the past,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm more of a putterer, like a
Yeah.
slow puttering turtle that gets a lot done, but much slower. I am the last out of the house. They are all waiting for me. And
That's your four-wing
so
also.
that's my four wing also.
I love that.
We've had to learn language, and I've had to, as a parent, take responsibility and say, at a certain point, especially even with talking and words, of course
Mhm.
I can talk a lot, but I also have a word and energetic limit. And
Yeah.
so I pay attention to my body much more now and say, I love you very much, but I'm done. My
Mm.
energy's done. Like my husband and I know now it's second
Yeah.
nature to us.
Mm.
And by me doing it actually gives my husband, who's a 3,
Yeah.
he does it now. I used to do it all the time and he would never, in which I would say, my energy is done. I need to not hang out tonight. Like, I just need alone time, or I'm done for the day. I need to go spend this time alone.
Mm.
Now he does that. and asks me, hey, I'm realizing I'm shot. Like, can you give me some space? And I'd be like, sure. My kids now get when I say I'm done and I'm going, like, don't open my door.
Yeah.
Because, or I say I have no words left. My words are done. If somebody keeps talking to me, like I just told you, I really am not going to be nice after this. I have given you all of my words and now they are finished. Because if I would push my body too hard, even language wise, if I would keep talking when I didn't have words left, I would get sick. Like, I am not kidding you. And so I started piecing out and saying I'm done in situations. And then I stopped getting sick. And so I noticed that. And it was like, oh, okay, this is something that is really important. And I think by modeling it, it helps my assertive people slow down a bit. And then conversely, it helps me do more, which is good for my body and good for my soul to get out and do more things out in the world than I would normally do. So we help each other out. I'm worn out a lot and they're very frustrated that I hold them back a lot. But we have language that we just say, oh, you guys like doing things a lot and mom isn't as much. So they have that kind of language. You guys move fast, mom just moves slow. We use that kind of, you guys are planners. I'm very like Ram Dass with my family. I'm always like, be here now. Be here now, please. Let's be here now. They laugh at me, but I'm like, look, I'm in the past. Can we, and you're in the future.
At least now.
Meet in the middle, like be in the present somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you've named it. You really have that. You've got this idealist at the top who's running ahead, and you're like, I know that's your rhythm, and I know that's where you feel the safest, but I have a different one, and I know it's frustrating for you, but we have to compromise. We have to find diplomacy. And I talk a lot about diplomacy with my couples, and it's extremely important, as are the boundaries you're setting. So I know they don't get it yet, but it's neat that we all know, and I know you know this, we all know it in faith that they will get that and they will appreciate that later, but you're just planting seeds right now when it's frustrating. You're willing to let them kick against the goads, if you will, to just have this safe space where they can say there are limits and ultimately they're good for me, even if they're annoying right now.
Yeah.
So that's so
Yeah.
important. That'll be so key for high school with me having to finishing up high school. I'm like, they've needed those limits and they don't know how to do it. And so just us being the ones to set them continues. And it's so important. And all of us run out of energy, even 8s and 7s eventually. So
Yes.
I love that you're telling them that now. I love that you invited your 3 into that, and that your glow, your shine, your way of moving together. It's so different when you see people who have been together as long as we both have, like you see both of the types in them because they've had such overlay from you. So that's really cool that you've invited him into that too.
Yeah. And he's invited me into, doing and planning in which I would rather not do and plan. And I mean, we fight about it constantly, but we have language for it now that helps us, even if we don't catch it and have kind of more of a heated, later on, we'll be like, okay, here's what's going on. Here's what's going on. So I find the Enneagram a tool that really helps depersonalize it a lot, as long as, and we totally do this too, we don't go, you're being such a 3, you're being such a 5,
Yeah.
and
Well, that's
weaponize
good that
it,
you
which
don't do that.
we do that. We
Oh,
absolutely
you do
do.
that.
Oh,
Okay. I was
100%.
like, I'm impressed, but okay. Yeah.
Oh no,
I
we
seem to do
absolutely, I
that too.
mean, of
Yeah.
course. Like, I mean, we are, again, like I said, we've only learned things the hard way. We fight hard, we play hard. I think we've taken it down a couple of notches over the years because the passionate, and then that's in air quotes, the big fights really don't make anybody feel good. So we've tried to not be as vitriolic at, how you get when you're with somebody, all the buttons to push and all of the things. So I think it still happens, but then we try to repair faster than we used to and that kind of stuff. So are we perfect? In no way. Will we continue to learn things the hard way? Probably. It just seems to be how we are. We're both kind of wired. We're both stubborn. We both like doing things our own way. And I think we're in the competency triad.
We both are.
Way of being competent is not necessarily my way of being competent, and they can very much rub. And so it takes a little bit of tension in order to get to that win-win where we like are diplomatic and go, well, what do you need? What do you need? And it sounds nicer than it actually, it's
Right.
usually not as like nicely worded as I'm portraying right in this moment. So we're very real.
Right. That's what it is. That's your
Yeah.
rye pairing. And I think that's important that other 3 5s are probably tuning in to say thank you for naming that. Somebody gets that. Somebody understands that we can be very harsh and cutting in our types, but that you guys also very much get that about each other. And I did, not only did the late Sue Johnson say it's in the repair, but many of the 3s that I work with really have to do that, because that boldness, that truth telling, can be very vitriolic, and it's not out of a cruelness. For 3s, it's about, I'm protecting myself. My heart is on the line. And then for 5s, of course, it's about safety. Like, are you kidding me? Are you threatening my safety? But like you said, you've already been sick. You know what that's like when you rise up too hard, too high. So there's a lot at stake here. And that's exactly why you guys are wired this way. But it's neat that you can say, well, we don't do it perfectly, but we know how to come back. And we do have some tools, some of these somatic practices that you've named today. And then if you have a moment, maybe you could just invite our listeners into at least hearing the very basic premise of IFS, in case any of them might be like, oh, I'd love to work with you and do somatics versus IFS. I've talked about it a few times, especially in our deeper dive podcast, but perhaps you could just intro that before we end today.
Sure.
Okay.
And again, I would say that there's IFS certified therapists, and there's different levels of that with therapy. And then the Institute, the Internal Family Systems Institute, just changed it for coaches. So they've just taken coaches off their certification. I think they're doing it differently because of, therapy has its own level of, I would think, insurance and board certifications and things like that. So they're now changing it. I can be IFS informed.
Okay.
And then once they do, and I am IFS informed, so I did the online learning circle through PESI, which was great.
Yes,
Therapists can be certified, and then they're working on a separate coaching certification right now that's not yet available because they're retooling it. So they're going to have 2 separate things. And once they do, then I will go back and get certified. So I am IFS informed.
Yes.
And I was introduced to it because of my son. A therapist noticed some dissociative tendencies, meaning having some parts that he didn't know about himself, which can happen very often in the foster care system.
Yes.
So she introduced us, and then, of course, like the 5 I am, I was like, I must go to school for this.
I need to know everything.
I need to know everything, and then I also want to be certified in it, and yeah.
Which
I have
is
to stop
blessing so
myself.
many people. So thank you for that.
Sure. That's a great reframe. I love it. It is, I mean, at its basic level, have you ever said, a part of me wants to do this, but another part of me wants to do that? And those 2 things are opposite, right? A part of me wants to go running, and a part of me wants to sit here and watch TV. And then I have this internal tension of, well, what do I do? So what one therapist who did a lot of research and study and then has expanded upon it, and again founded an institute in which they're training, it's blowing up right now, basically. And it's been around, I believe, since the 60s or 70s, I think, is when it started. So Richard Swartz, and he kind of came up with this modality that says, actually, we're not a monomind. We're not one of one mind. We have many parts or energies to us. And so when you say a part of me wants to go running and a part of me wants to watch TV, yes, those are 2 different parts of you, and they have different jobs to do. So the way I kind of learned the model through the online circle is there are no bad parts. There are different, they kind of break it into 3 categories. So and I don't tend to use, I think of more like protectors and exiles. There's, the ones that keep you safe and run the show. There's the ones that, I think the ones that kind of show up when something's triggered, they call firefighter parts. And then there's the exiles or wounded hidden parts. So you can have parts of you that are hidden. They keep and hold deep wounds that maybe your psyche, for whatever reason, does not know how to handle. So they hide them. And then there are parts of you that, manage the day-to-day, manage what happens when you're triggered, manage what you do in relationships, manage what you do with your body, with your eating. These parts have certain jobs. All of the jobs are good jobs. Some of them can be harmful to you, but even if you find harmful, like parts that have kind of harmful tendencies, you tend to get to know those parts and find out they're really working hard to protect you and keep you safe, which is
Mhm.
really similar to the Enneagram, in which you find these behavioral and motivational and thought and heart patterns, right?
Yes.
And you realize, oh, these were survival mechanisms that were working really hard to keep me safe. Once I notice them and send love to them, I can thank them and then have more awareness and openness to change. The
Mhm.
same thing with internal family systems. The modality is getting to know your parts, sending your parts love, creating safety for them, and then
Mhm.
through a process that they call unburdening, eventually getting to um, sort of a consensual
Mhm.
moving towards healing, and then a consensual opening up of some exiles and healing of those really deep hidden parts,
Mhm.
so that self energy, the whatever, they define it as calmness, curiosity,
Mhm.
um, self can help heal the parts so that you can have a more harmonious internal
Mhm.
relationship with yourself, with all the different parts of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
It's
my
hard to like summarize it because it's so complex and
so
nuanced.
well to summarize it. A good job. Seriously.
Thank you.
That was not easy. I'm like, "Oh, wow, she's covering it so well." And I think that you've given people a nice cursory understanding of what they might be invited into, and it's so safe the way you present it as a thinking type. I love that. Because I had always been weary of doing parts work, having had a mother with schizophrenia. So it just was always a part of
Mm.
me until I learned about IFS, and it's so safe. So I just want to invite listeners into that. And of course, sometimes people are mislabeled, but she actually was. And so
Mhm.
it's important that we do that work. And I love that you caught it when your son was earlier dissociative and whatever labels or diagnostics he may have or not have. As you said, doing your own work helped you to have fewer. And I think our listeners are invited into these safe spaces to heal so that they too would have fewer malaises across every diagnostic board and better health
Mhm.
just from doing this
Mhm.
mental work. It's part of it also.
Mhm.
Thank you. And then where do you feel like everybody would be best finding you? I know you have a beautiful grief book for children, but moreover, I really love that you have your practice online. Can you tell us about your Instagram too? Because that's where I first got in touch with you.
Thank you. Thanks. One, thank you for that lovely compliment. That was
Oh,
so nice.
so true.
The best place to find me is either, I mean, I was on Twitter. I mean, I'm still on Twitter. I mean, whatever you call it now, X,
Yeah, yes.
whatever. It's Twitter to me. I'm old. Um, so I'm still on Twitter. I'm on Threads, not as much those, but I have, a presence there. If you wanted to connect with me, I would eventually get to a DM there at some point, but I'm on those less.
Okay,
Um,
that's good.
Instagram or my website, which is Enneagram Paths, PATHS, like you're walking a path, .com, or Enneagram Paths on Instagram.
Mm,
Again, that's the same for Twitter and the same for Threads.
yeah.
That's how you kind of connect with me through those. You can DM me, and there's a contact form on my website to send me an email. So either one is fine.
Oh, I love that you check DMs. You have a huge account and that's meaningful. But I know that the work is going to be deeper. So all of your info is in the show notes. And thank you so much
Thank
for hanging out with us today, Melissa, and just inviting us into healing and letting us know the real. You were very logical with it. You're like, it is not going to
you.
be easy all the time, but there are paths that can help you. And that's where you're beautiful. Even your title comes in. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was lovely to be here.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much for tuning into this talk with us. What a refreshing gift. And if you are looking for our type by type series, we will be catching up with you on Wednesday of this week to talk about our type 8s. So thanks for joining. Make sure you catch everything of Melissa's in the show notes and have a wonderful day, you guys. Bye bye.